Oh, there you go. Use your jars on that one.
Yeah, it's just.
Oh, yeah, sorry, did you
I
forget it?
don't like it. You guys, oh, yeah, let's wait for it. I'll call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Bolinas Community Public Utility District Board of Directors. Board directors are present. Director Lupino is absent. Next on the agenda is community expression, an opportunity for members of the audience to address the board on any subject that they would like to speak about for several minutes. We cannot take any action since it's not on the agenda, but are willing to entertain anything you want to bring up. Is there any community expression?
Yes,
Okay,
should I start?
sure, please.
Hi, I'm Sandy Buckley. We own a house on Canyon. Nice to meet you. So I'm here to represent the whole Canyon Road, since no one else seems to show up for the meetings or have much interest in pursuing this. We're here today mostly because of what's going on at the beach, which I guess isn't going to be discussed today, but it directly impacts us because that bluff is contaminated right now. It's right behind Canyon Road, and Canyon Road is actually between two waterways. If you look at what's happening, the beach is on one side and the creek is on the other. And one of the reasons I was specifically hoping that we could be connected to the sewer system is because of the discharge from the creek on Canyon Road. And that was the reason we thought that the Water Resource Board allowed for us to be connected. That project appears to the people that live on Canyon Road to have been dropped. We were not informed that there was a Canyon Road committee and none of them were invited to join. And so that's what I would like to say.
Oh,
And then I would also like to say that this is definitely impacting us to have the beach permanently closed. And the effluents from the septic systems on that bluff have impacted the beach now. I've been clamoring to this board for 3 years about the influence of the effluents going down the creek into the ocean, which will happen as soon as it starts raining. And there are also 2 homeowners on Canyon Road that were mandated to hook up to the new system, and we were hoping to be included in that. That was thwarted by Jennifer almost putting the onus of responsibility on us for the finances. The last time we talked to her, she told us it was about $85,000 each. And we were very much thwarted by that. Since then, I've done a lot of research to find that there are multiple funding sites in the state, the EPA, and in Marin County that looks at resources and funding for low-income homeowners that need infrastructure repairs. So I don't know why no one here suggested that to us. I actually went to a meeting with Jennifer to try to get some of the 6.3 million that Marin had for infrastructure changes. And Jennifer told me it wasn't appropriate for our project. So that's what I would like to say.
well, we do have a committee of people who are involved with Canyon Road, so would somebody like to speak to it, either? And
Yeah, I mean, the project is still moving forward and we're still collecting the pieces of information that are required. Trying to decide how the easements, and as you remember, there's like the pipes would run through 6 properties at some point, so they would need some people would need several easements. But there's a lot of challenges, obviously, with the county and the coastal commission, and how we slice up the funding. I think we have explored some of the funding, but it's moving forward, and I don't think that there will be, unless some big funding happens, I don't think there's any scenario where homeowners wouldn't have to pay some of it.
I agree that most homeowners have to pay for laterals all over Marin County. When you look at the funding resources in Mill Valley, they provide loans for low-income residents that need laterals, and laterals don't cost $85,000 in general.
Well, I think, so we haven't gotten to the point where we're like, and step in if I'm wrong, where we are like set on a price or a cost, or even like what the scheme is, but. I will say maybe rather bluntly, like, if you have to spend $60,000 to $100,000 to save your house, I think it's. Probably in line with buying a new septic system, and it's probably worth it. So, for me, I think it's a really good opportunity for the residents of Canyon Road to have this. Sewer connection possibility. But it's definitely not dead, and we're still meeting and discussing and talking to engineers about it. So, and I do remember a meeting where you guys attended in November.
We've been to a lot of the meetings
Yeah.
and I've been involved with this. In fact, the reason that I got involved with that is this is after we bought the house. The land trust approached me with Ariane and offered me to join up to their septic system.
Yeah, the pilot
grant
program.
program. And I came to Jennifer when I had that opportunity because I was in their program and I came to Jennifer and I said, this is my option. We can do this,
Mhm.
or we can sign up with you. And I said, what do you suggest to me as a new homeowner here? And she suggested that I wait for this program. So I did that, which then thwarted our ability to have our own private septic system there. So there are some complicating issues here that aren't being included in the analysis that you weren't aware of, I think, the history prior to that.
Let me introduce Kevin, also another board member who's on that same committee.
Yeah, sorry if you got the impression that the project was dead. I don't have that impression. Like Andrew, I think the project is moving forward, maybe slower than you would like, so, I apologize for that, but.
Well, can we
it's-
then talk about the time? I don't know if you were gonna discuss this.
Yeah,
further.
we probably should move on to,
Check the time.
but-
Just get some stuff.
So,
Do you want me to do something? Annabelle?
unrelated.
This is a time for community expression, so we probably exhausted the period for that kind of discussion. We do have a Canyon Road Committee, which is on our agenda further down. So if you'd like to stay for that, then we can revisit this subject and I'll continue with the rest of the agenda. All right,
Thank you.
sure. Is there any other community expression items?
I just want to let the board know that I joined the Zero Waste Marin Local Task Force, representing BCPUD and West Marin in general. It's we work to create pilot programs and solutions to get people to consume less and waste less, so I'm part of that now.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other community expression items? None, okay, and then now consider amending order of items in the agenda. Do we want to change any of them?
I think that, I put that on there because it came up last time, but then again, I was thinking in particular, that the item related to the post office sign, the potential removal of the how many days without a post office, but then we heard from a member that they were gonna join around 7:30 or something. So I think this brings up the issue with this being like around where effectively somebody thinks it's coming up at a certain point and they're gonna, enter the meeting in a delayed fashion to kind of, convene in the meeting at that point. So I put it there because it's, annoying and kind of rude potentially to make people wait around for, all of the wonderful things we'll be discussing until the relevant item comes up, but I also think that there's kind of logistical issues with that, so.
So are you making any recommendations about changing?
Yeah, I'd say let's not do it, but if we wanna start kind of. I don't know, formalizing what that process would look like, and so it can appear on the agenda, the only reason I don't do that is because I like to have structure.
Yeah, I think structure is good, and I think if we wanted to change the order, we should probably do it, last week leading up to tonight and sort of set the order and maybe stick with it. That would
Yeah.
be-
All right,
seems like a good plan,
okay,
but maybe with a preference for kind of pushing community focused topics further up the agenda.
Yeah,
Like you did
I'll-
tonight, I think a lot of people are probably here for item 3, so that
Yes.
shouldn't be too long, so.
But yeah, I think like in the past, we've had like Sherry Hirsch waiting until 10 o'clock. She's volunteering her time. She
Yeah.
should- maybe she wants to wait through the meeting anyway, but I do think that volunteers and people like that. should
We've
be-
also moved our meetings. up.
Yeah, the other thing is that we could just
Sure.
restructure the meeting so that like the manager's update is not the first thing on the meeting.
Hmm.
because that always takes a while,
Yeah.
and most people are not here to hear that. I mean, you all are, but
Although that's really why. The thrust of why we're here.
All right.
yes,
We need to-
I'm fine with shifting that if you're making a recommendation.
I mean, I'll look
Back
into it for
towards the
next time,
end.
but I'd say for now, we stick to.
I think we stay with the agenda as it's been posted.
But are we gonna make an agreement that we are fine with you to move the manager's report towards the end?
We can do that, I mean, we can move the.
I think that's up to your
Oh, you mean like tonight?
discretion. Yeah, no, let's go with the agenda that we have.
That's what I mean.
Let's empower her to
Change it.
change the agenda, which we've had for at least the 4 years that I've
Yeah,
been here. That you have the discretion to change it if you want to.
sure. All right, well, with that and looking at the agenda as written, item 1 is in fact the manager's report. So it starts with manager's update. Take it away.
Okay. All right, so today is September 18th, 2024. I'm gonna go pretty quickly over the water supply. You guys are well aware of these graphs at this point. And just to point out, we are still in this very early point in the rain year, so the data is not very interesting yet. As of August 2024, the district had received 0.06 inches of rain since the start of the rain year on July 1, 2024. That's again why we're only looking at these 2 months. And this is slightly below the average of 0.12 inches for this time of year. And this is the second month in the new 2024 year. Okay, and all of that rain came in August. If you remember last month, we didn't have any rain. And again, we're sitting down here just because, you know, we haven't reached the rainy months yet, but this stock will move up, hopefully. Again, this is not very meaningful yet because we are not dealing with a lot of rain, but basically this is our rainfall progression analysis. And we've, again, only had that much rain at 0.06. And effectively, that means we're predicting average rainfall because there's no rain. There's usually no rain at this point, and so we're expecting everything to be normal without any indication that it's not. This analysis uses historical data, you know, and it obviously becomes more meaningful. Let's say we're in January and we've had a ton of rain, then obviously we're going to be predicting a higher than average total for the year, and vice versa. If we were below average in January, then we're essentially predicting a lower total. So at this point, again, we're this data I would say is not super meaningful, but we're at 45% of years had more rain by the end of August than we've had right now. Creek flows here. This is our model for the Arroyo Hondo Creek. Again, the Arroyo Hondo is our surface water supply that is providing water currently. We are at a point, the last couple of times I spoke to you, I think we were at a point where it was still at the lip's edge of the lower impoundment. We are now at a point when we are drawing from the creek during water production. We actually have like a delta between the top of the impoundment and where the water level is. That's the point where we could start measuring creek flows, testing the model. We haven't done that yet because we've all been very busy, but we need to start, you know, getting that into our kind of daily routine in order for this, you know, this data to be more meaningful. But still using the model, we can still predict or model that at the end of August, the creek flows were at 120,000 gallons per day. And, you know, again, we're just in this trajectory where we're going through the dry months. And, creek flows are, you know, modeled to be lower and lower as we have less and less rainfall. It's been a longer and longer stretch from, the heavy rains of the winter. And by the end of July, you can see that we had predicted that it was around 140. So we're really, you know, things are modeled that are dwindling fast, which is again consistent with what we're seeing now, where when we're starting to see a decrease in the water levels as we draw from the creek. And then by the end of September, we're predicting that they'll be around 100,000 gallons per day. Despite this decrease in flow, we have not yet had to divert from the Wood Rat Reservoir, which is good, because as we all know, the water quality there is not as good as the creek.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Mm-hmm.
Can you just like give a really quick schematic of how the water is forced from Arroyo Hondo to the reservoirs to the plant, and then when the reservoir typically stops spilling over? Or maybe.
Oh, you mean in terms of how, so right, we have a license that allows us to draw creek water, but we don't ever really use that. Ultimately, the reservoirs are filled through rainwater, if that's what you were talking about.
But we're not using the reservoirs for our daily production of water.
Mm-mm.
So can you just like refresh us on the path of the water that gets from Arroyo to us?
Okay,
And
yeah.
how the reservoirs are filled? Are they filled from the canyons that they're in, or are they filled?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just, and one of the things that I think would be, I mean, I mentioned this before, but I think that the water quality in the reservoirs is very poor. It feels like we have a lot of resources towards something that we hardly ever use in terms of, you know, we just spent almost $10,000 in Azolla removal, for instance, from Wood Rat 1. And yet we're in a position where we don't really want to use that reservoir water. So it feels a little bit dysfunctional to me in terms of, okay, well, if we're gonna use, could we be using this resource in a more routine way? And maybe do some refurbishment of, I mean, I don't know, but basically hire a consultant who knows how to, revive and improve water quality in a reservoir. My kind of own intuitive sense is that might also mean using that water more regularly so that it doesn't stagnate. And then also drawing, we do have a license that allows us during wet weather to draw from the creek to fill Wood Rat 2. And so like, what does that look like if we started to implement a kind of more of a sort of cycling of the water there? That's again, like something I'd like to do. When that gets done, who that specialist is, I think I asked Rob at some point if there was somebody he might know.
It's gonna be somebody who's it's gotta be a hidden pond aeration, it's gonna be an air sparging kind of a system.
Mhm.
We can circle back on it.
But yeah, just, and then more kind of broadly, I mean, the water is diverted off through a transmission line that then runs along, Mesa Road there all the way to the treatment plant. And there is, a diversion that from that transmission line to Wood Rat 2. But again, that's, as far as I know, not used.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then this brings us to our stored volumes. Again, the reservoirs are not spilling, but they're effectively full. And whatever's happening there is just, minor evaporation and stuff, because we're not drawing from them. This brings us to our water production and consumption in July. Again, remember, these are based on the amount of water that is effectively leaving the treatment plant. So these are all, essentially estimates. So for instance, what we call it consumption, it's really not based on the meter reads, just to bring in that nuance. Okay, so production in August 2024, water production in the district averaged 92,000 gallons per day. This is down from July production, which averaged 115 gallons per day. Consumption, water consumption, July average 92. Sorry, why is this saying July? What is going on here? Please, sorry, give me a second here. Not look. I think that this is, I just have some typos
Yeah,
here.
I think. it's-
Okay, this is in August, this is all August numbers. But this is August and this is August, sorry about that. But I do remember that July was 200 gallons per day. And just to remind you guys, we've talked about this several times now, but basically, we used to present this data almost like up to the meeting. And now we just do a retrospective on the last month. Yeah, so that's basically what's going on here, and that's for all the data that I just presented. And then the other thing that I added fairly recently was just to say, recent water consumption. So this is basically, you know, what data we've collected and input from September 1st to the 11th. We're at 189 gallons per day. But again, this is important to understand that if we have leaks, like we're counting this as consumption, but obviously that's not real consumption where, you know, a user could decrease their use and impact this number, if that's really what's going on. Then you guys have seen this now for a while, but we just finished out basically the year. And as we were predicting, we could already see that by these are real meter reads, right, per region, per quarter. And we just effectively finished the year, and as we were predicting, consumption's going back up. This is real consumption based on some meters, meter reads. I was noticing this pink line. I think that the data here, there's something wrong with it, so I'll go and look at that because effectively this pink line is the consumption that I was just reporting on the previous slide, which is an estimate, which really does allow us to look at the differential here between that pink line and where the meter reads are falling, and that really allows us to kind of measure our water loss, which we anticipate is around 10%. But it doesn't make sense that it's converging right here, so I think there's just some data missing from this slide. The last little bit of the year that wasn't in there. Okay, so that's the water supply memo. Just to quickly revisit, this is Stephen Torrance, who is the director of the Office of Emergency Management at Marin County, came out and visited us. And we got to discuss Alert Marin. Just to remind you, that was on the board meeting last month, and we talked about the capability of it to essentially for us to piggyback on it and say alert customers to water leaks and all of that. So I got to learn more about, you know, sort of the practical use of Alert Marin. It is a very powerful tool. I'm glad Steve's here. I heard Steve mentioning in the community meeting that people should sign up for Alert Marin. We would urge you to sign up for Alert Marin as well. However, and that's, you know, sign up for Alert Marin. You can follow that link if you look at these materials or anyone online is looking at them. But it is not particularly well suited to what we want to do for day-to-day operations, as we were suspecting. And that is, it's really an emergency system. And, you know, having your water cut off for a few customers for a small period of time really isn't meeting the threshold of an emergency. We will definitely use it if we have a water quality issue, where essentially we would be notifying people immediately of a boil water notice or for a do not drink notice. I hope I don't have to send those out ever, but in the event that we did, that's definitely what we would use. Is, as I said, it's a very powerful tool in that depending on the sort of threshold of the emergency, you can essentially alert the dispatch, hey, we need this to go out to everybody, not just homeowners here that have opted in through their address, but literally people that are visiting would get an alert on their phone. And then there's sort of the second tier down from that, which is, you know, you put in your address, your interest, you know, you live on wherever, in Bolinas, and then you are part of, you know, even if you're out of town, you're gonna be getting those messages. But again, it's not really what, you know, what, you know, BCPUD staff really wants is basically the guys are in the field responding to an emergency leak. They go out and address it, say on a Sunday. Belle and I are not around and they are able to directly alert the affected customers.
Cause they're going around knocking.
Yes, otherwise, and we get a lot of complaints and rightly so. Hey, why didn't you tell me about this water shut off that you knew was gonna happen? And that's, you know, I mean, I think it's important to understand that, you know, the nature of our work is it's emergency leaks. And sometimes we don't have the capacity to alert people. However, when we do, it's kind of, I think in this day and age, incumbent on us to have some kind of messaging system that if people opt in, when essentially, you know, they're alerted, you know, before, you know, as soon as we are aware.
Besides
of
going
potential
not
shut.
door to door, because I've had them come around and say, hey, we have an emergency shutdown downtown Warren, we're gonna want you to know.
Yeah,
So very appreciative. If I weren't there to answer the door, are they leaving a pamphlet or what other?
it really depends on the nature of it, but yeah, generally what we do is post on Nextdoor. I mean, that's really our default, because the other issue is that essentially what we have are some really old emails.
Yeah.
And not up to date information related to customer service, I mean, customer, you know, database. Additionally, you know, it's such that people, you know, renters are not necessarily, like the water user
Right.
is not necessarily who we would have in a customer database anyway. And so I personally think that it's kind of, yeah, we could get together a listserv from our emails. It's so old and would need so many updates that I just feel like our time is better served to try to find, you know, a messaging
I would
service.
prefer text, because if you
Yes.
send me an email.
Yes,
I'm
exactly,
not
and that's the
getting-
other thing is that people's emails, I mean, they have a million different emails, people tend to change their phone numbers less, so a text-based messaging alert system is really gonna be much more effectual.
What about utilizing the people who have been appointed per neighborhood? With
Yeah,
the police?
I think that it's
Could
a-
you use them, because then you've got what, like 5 or 6 people that you have to reach out to, and then it's incumbent on them to let their neighborhood know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that along the lines of this, obviously, the other important factor is that in emergency, I mean, true emergencies, right? Sometimes cellular service is impacted, so you have these other kind of, like you're talking about, like, what do you call those?
Like the designated.
Disaster council,
What's on
Disaster
Yeah,
disaster council.
and these, yeah, other means to reach people, especially people that are, you know, disabled, all of that.
I mean, I
That
think
needs to
until you
be
get
done.
this system in place, that might be a good resource to lean into, and also continues to create some community network with that individual in that neighborhood.
Mhm.
How many instances would you say something like this would be used per year? Like, I mean,
Uh,
is it quite often?
are we talking about emergency?
Well, no, like a neighborhood specific, you know, water leak, or we need to shut off your water all of a sudden.
I mean, unfortunately, right now, it's pretty frequently.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other thing is like, how do you target this message? You know, you want it, you don't want it to, you know, the not really nice thing about Alert Marin that I also described here is that essentially, you know, that's a system where the dispatch can draw a line around any region that you know, literally like they're just putting a polygon and you could be like, this part of Birch. And they would just do that and it would send out an alert.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ideally, if whatever system we adopt could be like that, that would be great.
Yeah.
However, you know, we're kind of weighing, well, what is the expense of this thing versus how annoying is it for us to blast out a message to essentially everybody and you're like, oh, I don't care, we don't live on Birch or whatever. That's, you know, and again, we're working with our IT person right now to kind of see what our options are. Okay. So I think that's that. Just moving on to the bike path, on September 9th, I met with Leo Kostelnik, the superintendent of Lewiston Unified School District. And he directed me to this Safe Routes to School meeting, which I attended yesterday evening. And basically I had the opportunity to present to that meeting. And while it didn't they're not really a funding agency, they're a group that effectively is concerned with making sure that there's safe corridors for children to get to and from school. But they were a good point source for understanding the types of funding sources that are available to this for these types of projects. Just briefly, the reason that this kind of got into I mentioned this before, but basically I think that the funding for the state parks funding that will serve the refurbishment of the bike path goes till 2028. I have suggested that we hit pause on that until some of the complexities around the eucalyptus. The BEP just submitted their coastal permit application, on which you guys are co-applicants, or the BCPUD is co-applicants, to the county last week. And I think it makes sense to have some of that play out, to understand, to have ideally even some of the work done related to that before we would pursue the bike path. And additionally, what I was a little bit anxious about is that we were moving towards a project where effectively we had enough money to make little portions of this path, and it was kind of feeling like a bridge to nowhere. Like ultimately, a bike path is only useful if it, to have a really nice stretch that isn't contiguous and doesn't get people from point A to point B is, a little bit sad. And so, what I was kind of hoping is, well, a lot of these stretches of this path are really line the county public rights of way. And to what effort could we coordinate, or to what level could we coordinate with them? And effectively try to really conserve our pool of money to this more complicated portion of the bike path that's really on district property, and then see if there is potential funding to essentially, this is like highlighting these yellow portions here that are, hopefully fairly straightforward, but obviously need dollars and cooperation of the county. And then, in the end, ideally, we've refurbished these more complex portions, and they have extended the bike path downtown so that, children leaving the school don't just end up in the middle of Bolinas on that portion. That's really pretty dangerous. And then ultimately, that this stretch extends all the way to the Teixeiras, where there are a lot of school age children. Obviously, this is, my intention was, hey, school, you should be taking the lead on a lot of this.
Yeah.
And so that was the intention there, and that, so that's kind of broadly what I was thinking about around this whole thing. Unfortunately, it wasn't like I went to that meeting and they said, yes, we have $5 million. And we will do all of this. But it is, I did make some contacts and essentially, effectively arranged to speak with those people offline to better understand those funding sources. But again, I think it's more appropriate that the school take the lead on this. And hopefully, again, like I said, that will allow us to conserve our funding and really focus on the portions that meander through the eucalyptus grove. But ultimately, just to reiterate, I don't think it makes sense to pursue that full board until we understand how the whole situation with the trees plays out.
And is the superintendent well receptive to
Oh,
that?
super, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you've got a
Yes,
potential
and the
partner
board
here.
there is very passionate about this issue.
Okay.
And yeah, it's,
I attended one of their past meetings a few months ago, just as a
Safe
parent, I was
routes.
in, I was trying to find a backdoor path from the school to Mesa Park. Yeah,
Mhm.
like that that road there, that gray road. There used, I think there used to be footpaths historically, but they've sort of been closed off as new owners come in and, you know, Star Route kind of, anyway. So that sort of was a dead end, but I appreciate the work. Because I think it'd be a great improvement for the town.
Yeah,
And, you know, as a board, we've gone back and forth with what to do with our grant and the bike path. I think we put it on pause to see how Bet was gonna, you know, how that was gonna go, but then I think we decided to go ahead with the bike path.
Yeah.
But now we're sort of putting it on hold again. So hopefully now that, you know, the permit application is in with the county for the eucalyptus project, hopefully we'll get some clarity there in the next months, and we can decide what to do.
okay. Okay, so that leads to some operations update. So, just, you know, there's kind of some good news and some bad news. The good news is last month we had all of these leaks along Wharf Road, and these were really expensive repairs because of the paving costs associated with getting us back to you know, the county standards and what they require, which I know Jennifer has harped are you know, progressively more and more expensive, and ultimately end up being like half the cost of any project is basically the paving part of the project. But what we've been dealing with is just repeated leaks on the gridded mesa. And it's not surprising when you see the stuff, the pipes that are being pulled out of the ground. It's they're very old. And it really needs to be a priority, and it's really grating on the operators to like, it's just, you know, it's kind of like, what is that guy's name? And you carry the rock and then it comes back.
Sisyphus.
Yeah, Sisyphus. So that's kind of the feeling I get, you know, with, it's just like, you know, Birch Road again. And like, they're out there again, and it seems too that it's like everything, since I joined, everything's gotten worse. And this is also the case. It's just like, it seems not just that they're kind of at their end, but it's just more common now. And it's just probably, you know, all of the infrastructure is about the same age, and so it probably all kind of fails at the same time. So anyways, it's something that's Stu and I and Belle have really started to earnestly talk about, like, we need to prioritize this, because effectively we're paying for it either way. And so, you know, what does that look like? So,
Maybe better pay it forward than
yes,
after.
yes,
I was gonna say, Linda, this is not a new subject to you, because we, some years ago, talking about trying to prioritize which roads were the worst and ought to be attacked first, and did that priority list ever get finalized, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer and I talked about this quite a bit, and it was talked about in the finance committee. So the good part of it is that at least the pipelines went on to the 5-year capital projects list. The bad news is they were never near the top of this list. There was always more pressing things.
Yeah.
And we actually didn't replace any of the pipeline in the 9 years I was on the board, even though that was one of the things I had already heard ought to be a priority when I came on the board. And it's just been a question of, A, we needed a lot more money available for capital expenditures than we had, and we were making a little bit of progress on that, you know, gradually some progress, but when I first came on the board, there was way too little money for capital projects. And the other is just, there was always things that had to be done, and it's so time consuming for management to manage those. It was very difficult to do more than one project a year. So, you know, the water storage tanks, which we still haven't finished with that, you know, and which actually turned out to be in much worse shape than we had realized. You know, they, for example, became a priority in front of the pipelines. So, but of course, I think it's great if this gets pushed up the priority ladder. And honestly, one of the things we'll have to consider is, well, first of all, we're talking about beefing up our management so that we've got more capability within management to manage projects. And secondly, we will have to consider if we have to hire project managers, because management is too overstretched to be able to manage a project, and so it costs money as well, but it does look like some of these things, BPUD really should need to move a little faster on. Some of them are really overdue at this point.
Since you're fresh eyes to the board and the job.
Yeah, I mean, I did talk to, I think I mentioned I met pretty early on with Kent, the general manager over in Stinson Beach, and I was intrigued at the idea that, I mean, I don't know how well this system worked, but he was talking about kind of essentially having an index for his capital improvement projects that sort of removes some of the subjectivity around it, and so you get like a point system where you can imagine something like this versus, say, the tank. This would have, okay, it has a low catastrophic impact because, the pipe on Birch fails, we go fix it, right? Whereas obviously if the tank fails, that's horrendous, right? But then you understand, well, what is the probability that the Birch 100%, right? And so it gets a big, a lot of points for essentially the urgency or whatever that, that item gets called on. Anyways, it was an intriguing idea of sort of revisiting what our capital improvement project looks like and sort of kind of agnostically diagnosing all of those items on there and kind of seeing how they fall out. And I think that we are underestimating the importance of these routine leaks and what that ultimately leads to in the form of expense and like the idea that you're ultimately paying for this anyway. And so you might as well actually bite the bullet and just replace it.
Okay, well, listen, I think it needs to be addressed in probably through the budget committee then.
Well, we already itemized some of these.
Yeah.
That we think this is gonna happen in the year 25, 26, or this is gonna happen in 5 years, so we've already. Thanks to Lyndon, started to identify when we think we're gonna need that funding.
Mhm.
But it might need to go to the next tier, which
Yeah.
is like an operations team looking at their capital improvements. To start to implement that funding, or when do we actually need it for this tier system?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this to you guys before, I think that. I mean, maybe it's just semantics, but to my mind, I feel like we would be better served through a capital improvement. Committee
Yeah,
versus an operations committee.
okay.
And that committee, I like hate to do this to the two of you, but basically because the capital improvement project discussion really gets embedded into a financial discussion and it deserves its own thing. Like it's a really important discussion that I think leads into a financial, and you could imagine that we sort of have the two of you on, or we do have the two of you on that financial committee, and that you could have sort of these kind of dual committees where it's sort of seasonal, where it's like this time of year, we have the capital improvement project reassessment. And that ultimately leads into, okay, let's implement that through our financial and budgetary. And the two committees are obviously playing off of each other in this like cyclical way. But I would like to do something like that. Obviously, it's like that should happen now.
I was gonna appoint Grace only. Because she's around. But okay, I mean, I understand that. It's just the finance committee takes so much time already.
Yeah.
There's one.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it's just at least one individual is on there that's on the finance committee, Andrew, no, so.
No,
They are wedded, the two.
But it's just so much, I think that those
Yeah.
conversations are much more efficient if.
Yeah.
You are well versed in both.
Well, I'm personally more interested in the actual
Capital improvement.
capital improvement, I happen to be on the finance committee. It's still in there.
Okay,
But okay, well, we
Yeah,
can talk
I
about
think it's a
that.
good observation.
yeah. All right, why don't you continue with the manager's report?
Yep, okay, so the well projects, they're moving forward. You'll notice there's a resolution on for the, later in the meeting. This is basically to allow us to use force account labor, which is essentially our own people, to do much of this work, because this is actually a weird little project that's like halfway underway. We've already procured some of the materials. It's mostly like moving things around. And then there's sort of these, set portions of the project, like electrification of the project and where the project will, you know, interface with the mains on the county roads, where effectively we would be bringing contractors there, and depending on how much money that costs, we would either have to go out to publicly bid those portions of it. So that's basically on there. Yes, and we, meaning BCPUD staff, continues to meet with Habitat and BCLT, because the more complicated project at this point is the 31 Wharf, because obviously this project is interfacing with the large development there, and we obviously need to make sure that both projects are compatible with one another.
Are we waiting like a permit approval for this?
No,
Isn't there like gonna be a plant here in the parking lot?
there will, but that was the coastal development permits that we received. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, have those been issued?
Yeah, those have been issued. Those were issued at the end of June.
Okay.
And so we're just, there are some other complexities around easements, and that is something that we're, you know, conferring with BCLT on. Those coastal development permits from, effectively the, Department of Public Works, as a condition of permitting requires that we get a public easement and an access easement.
Okay.
So essentially, we had this kind of informal license agreement, that's not gonna serve the project that we had with BCLT, so we need to revisit that and make those easements, which ultimately are better, they better serve the project, because they will be heftier and, you know, serve the, our, you know, we will be able to continue with that sourcing from that well, even say if BCLT ultimately sold the
Yeah.
property or whatever.
Okay.
Okay, then we have the tank site pipeline replacement project, which is quite a mouthful, but this is at the tank sites. This kind of dovetails into what Lyndon was talking about. So my understanding is that this tank right here that I hope you guys can see that.
Yeah.
That one, I think it maybe it's the east tank, or I'm not sure how we refer to them, but this one was refurbished. And then it was discovered when they went to go refurbish this one, that actually the pipes that connect the two tanks needed to be redesigned and reconstructed. And so it's this somewhat complicated project to redo all of this 10-inch piping that ultimately serves the entire town. So it's a big, important project. And it is getting started on September 23rd, so that's exciting. Piazza is conducting this work. We have the radial gate repair, so this is the picture of that lower impoundment, and it is a described as a radial gate because it's a movable barrier. And so as a reminder, there is supposed to be an assessment of the impoundment surrounding this, the surrounding cement wall and the gate when creek flows are at their, you know, effective lowest. Because ultimately the engineers are gonna have to like divert the creek. And so, you know, obviously you want that diversion process to be easy. Where this stands is that basically we're waiting to hear back from Gannett Fleming around, you know, what this proposal for the assessment really looks like. Ultimately, we need to bring that to the park, to get their permit, their use permit. And then they'll be able to actually do the work. So I just need to effectively keep nudging. Jennifer had introduced me and reached out to them at the end of August. Well, that's not that long ago, but basically, I've learned that much of my job is just like picking people over them. So that's that. Then the operations, our fifth of six operations updates, the Wharf Road seawall repair. So this is basically, I asked the county engineer, hey, can you provide me with some language that I can, deliver to the board and the public? And this is, I'm just gonna read this because this is really their language. So FEMA has reduced the scope of what they consider new damage caused by the storm based on new information about existing conditions prior to the storm. The county would like to provide BCPUD more time to assess their utilities relative to the construction impacts. And the proposed drilling of the curtain wall is too impactful to the residents to be constructed without additional information. CSW, this is the engineering firm, right, has packaged a revised drawing that has a small area that FEMA is still considering and a small area the county will fund. This project should cost under $200,000 and be far less impactful to residents or the utilities. BCPUD water main does not need to be relocated for this initial repair of the storm damage. The curtain wall is more of a preventative step that was not immediately necessary. So obviously this is,
Aren't we glad that we didn't spend all our life
Yes.
designing
yes.
that
Yeah.
reconfiguration?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like sad but happy in terms of, this big huge project's not happening, but the big huge project was a little crazy. And it basically lost its funding is really what happened, I think, at some level. And so that's kind of, it is what it is.
There's a lot of work and stress for you at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of a good lesson because it was sort of, as it turned out, there wasn't, it was like stressful and I got to learn a lot of things. But in the end, there wasn't any fallout, like nothing I did or didn't do badly had any impact because nothing really mattered.
Yeah.
It was just all pretend.
Well, I mean, what I would like to see is the funding come back to make sure that the county and coastal commission and or FEMA continue to invest.
Yes,
in
I mean, it's-
infrastructure and our access and the people. I mean, the beach access, which is Maine right there, and the people that live there.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I do hope the funding doesn't just disappear. I hope the county will continue to find. The problem's has not gone away, and I don't even think it's just in that area that they've identified.
No, I mean, part of the reason that the funding went away is because the road is such a mess, right? It's like, oh no, this wasn't all caused by that storm. So that doesn't, it's not like the problem is going away. Anyway, okay, moving on, the solar inverter. I've made progress, which is really exciting.
That's huge.
I'm like talking to human beings and that's very helpful. This like was a total roller coaster basically on, I don't know, it was like a couple of days ago. I basically spoke to a engineer at this Solar Technologies is the company, and they informed me that, we should replace both of the old SatCon 30 kilowatt inverters with a new Solectria 60 kilowatt, which essentially will replace the both of them, and that the price tag was around $40,000. So that sounded really sad and scary, but then they called me back and they're like, hey, we've actually made some progress on other StatCons. It was basically they, through other work that just happened, they got in contact with somebody who knows a lot about StatCons and were able to repair the inverter, a similar exact same inverter effectively, or same model, and on some other project. And so he's like, I'm not suggesting the $40,000 fix anymore. I'm suggesting that let's try this similar fix. So that's about $2,000. And they will come out and do some other work that they had, when they did their initial assessment. There's some kind of effectively menial upgrades and, replacing of some parts that's, doesn't really, hasn't had a huge impact and not a big price tag. So, we'll kind of combine all of that.
Great to know what's the life expectancy.
Yeah, I asked him that because I was like, I mean, if we're ultimately gonna have to, and he was like, no, it should last a really long time, and he was really recommending that we go with this cheaper route, even though I was like, is this really, I don't wanna ultimately have to just do this in a year. And then the other thing that part of why I started really, pressing on this again, I mean, again, it was like poke, no response, but then we got our PG&E true up and it was $30,000. So that was just like, I mean, the billing and all of that is so opaque. I don't know how, when we get the second inverter on board, like what that, obviously the PG&E expense or charges are like going up. Yes, a lot, and essentially the what they pay you for the power you produce is basically stable as far as I understand. So I don't know, once this inverter is back online, what that will do to next year's true up, but it's obviously gonna help somewhat, so.
It would be helpful to understand when you're drawing the most power.
Yeah, I mean, during
Yes.
water production,
Yeah.
that's when we are. I don't know, I mean, that's, during effectively when workers are there to produce water, so I don't know if we get a lot of flexibility about when we would be able to do it.
During working hours, basically.
Yeah.
It seems like we just paid off our
Wow.
10-year loans for the solar array, if I remember
Yeah, we
correctly.
did.
And then these kind of crapped out, bad timing.
Mhm.
Has BPUD ever looked into alternative energy sources like wind generators or turbines? We have our reservoirs spilling constantly, well, not constantly, but through some of the year.
I can speak to that a little bit, because this is just remembering things that Don Smith has said, because Don was the one who had really focused on this. And of course, it was quite a while ago that the solar panels went in. And they have been break even all along until we paid off the loans for them, in which now it's better than break even. Now we don't have any loans we're paying off.
Except they're not online, so they're.
But there has been a continuing problem with inverters. So I have to echo Kristen's comment, we gotta better make sure if we're buying anything new on inverters, that we have some kind of warranty on those things, because we've had a number of inverter problems already in the past. On the wind issue, Don said that there had been wind surveys done. And there's not, even though it seems like it's windy as hell out here, it wasn't gonna be cost effective in terms of the amount of sustainable wind. So that was the conclusion at an earlier point about wind power. By the way, while I'm speaking, I just want to correct something I said before. I kind of implied that we hadn't done very much over the past 10 years about increasing the capital part of the budget where we had money available for capital projects. And my recollection is that when I came on the board, which is now 10 or 11 years ago, we were averaging about $100,000 a year for that portion of the budget, and it's now more like 500,000. So actually, quintupling is this significant rather than insignificant difference. So I didn't want to have leave the impression that the board had ignored this issue or belittle. Unfortunately, 500,000 is not enough, but it is significant progress. Thank you.
Well, I recall that the wind studies always show that when the wind blows, it really blows hard, but there were many days when it just wasn't blowing hard enough to create enough electricity. And over the course of a year, it turned out not to be worth it.
Yeah.
Which
Well, that feels different today. I don't know when these studies were done.
several of them over the years, it always came to that end result. We were all surprised, as we thought, God, it blows like hell, But,
Yeah, I remember local electrician Reiner Alterman put in a windmill on his property because he thought he could make that work. And that was discovered by his study and his use. He tried to make it work and it wasn't consistent enough. The wind is not consistent. It can go a good long time. without wind. So you
Yeah.
don't depend on it. So you'd have to use it in conjunction with another form of power.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it more as building some redundancies into the system and maybe turbine technology has changed. I don't know when this was, 20 years ago, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Had to do more with enough number of days when there was enough wind blowing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the hard part. Anyway,
All
we've looked at it.
right, so moving on
Keep
to
going.
miscellaneous updates, we have the groin repair project, and just to remind you where we are here, this is. We are ready for Jeanette Fleming at the engineering firm to provide assessment and construction drawings. The board already approved this engineering work. It is in the range of $30,000 to $35,000. BCPUD staff will keep nudging Jeanette Fleming to get this work back on their docket. Just to remind you, this is the same Jeanette Fleming that will be doing the assessment of the radial gate. So obviously, when I nudge them on all of this.
Maybe there's an economy of scale.
Yes, and then, Jeanette Fleming again, seawall repair at Surfers Overlook. So this is basically another Jeanette Fleming project. As a reminder, this is actually no longer on our plate, this is on the county's plate. And the last word that BCPUD, i.e. I got was that this, back in July, Jeanette Fleming asked if we could provide labor to support a dig out of piles so that their engineer could assess the state and integrity of the piles to determine if they were salvageable. And we were told that that work was likely gonna happen in August, and I have not heard back, so I'm presuming that it didn't happen or they didn't need our help. But I'll ask, when I nudge them on those other two issues, I'll ask, hey, what's going on with Surfers Overlook and that repair? And then finally, we hired or offered jobs, they're starting shortly, 2 new employees. This is Sean Morgan, who is replacing the 4th operator who left Lake Miller back a few months ago. And Annie Laughlin is been offered a job and they both accepted as the administrative aide. So it's really
Congratulations.
exciting.
Yeah,
great.
that's
Nice job.
great.
Have they started?
No, and I mean, Annie, I think will start some part-time, they both were wanting to give their employers 2-week notice, Sean's is almost up. And he'll be starting, I think, on Monday.
Right.
It's huge.
Good news. Is that the end of your manager's report?
Yes, that
Okay,
is, sorry.
that's all right.
No, you did great.
Yeah. Okay, item 2 has nothing under it. Item 3, special reports or updates. Beach closure due to effluent along the bluff and coordinated response of the county and the BPUD.
Okay, so that's me again, so I'm just gonna.
Grace.
Looks like a dog.
There, there.
Yeah. What was that? Okay, so this is the item that Jack just introduced. So BCPUD is coordinating with the county on assessing and responding to this issue. This situation is still under preliminary investigation. The county does not yet know the source of potential wastewater contamination. I will take, and I mean, I will take, it will take time to assess this situation, and depending on the findings, the mitigation strategies will take time to implement. This will not be resolved in a week. As BCPUD and the county learn more, we will continue to update the community. And so I had a meeting today, this morning, with BPUD, as a BPUD representative, Belle and I were both there, and with several county representatives. And the regional board, this is the California State Water Resource Control Board, to discuss this issue and next steps. So just to let people know, the regional board is the specific state regulatory body that oversees BCPUD's small wastewater collection and treatment system. The what we're talking about here is obviously BCPUD's small sewer system that serves 164 customers that live in the areas of downtown, the Little Mesa, and along Terrace Avenue, and treats the collected wastewater at the sewer ponds. The same regional board, these are, two effectively staff members that are, designated to oversee Bolinas. This same regional board oversees the County of Marin's oversight of Bolinas' septic systems. So the environmental health services at the county, you'll hear that like referred to as EHS, at the County of Marin issues all permitting associated with construction, repair, replacement, or modifications of all OWTSs. This is on-site wastewater treatment sites, aka septic systems, in Bolinas. Again, we're at the super preliminary stages of all this, and I do not have anything to report from this meeting, except to say that all our agencies are actively working on this issue. So the other things I would like to move on to, if people were not aware, I just kind of wanted to use this opportunity to, and I hope this isn't too annoying, but to basically read the Nextdoor post. Because I know a lot of people don't use Nextdoor, and have been calling us and asking a lot of questions. And so I just wanted to read the post that the county, put on Nextdoor. So, dear neighbors, we want to update you on the wastewater issue that partially closed Bolinas Beach on Friday, September 6th, which led to the recommendation for Mesa residents using well water to switch to bottled water for drinking. So the overview here is wastewater is visibly seeping from Bolinas Mesa bluffs in several areas, affecting an area over a mile long between Rosewood Road, that's north, and to Canyon Road, southwest of Brighton to south of Agate Beach. Samples taken on September 5th showed high levels of bacteria, including coliform, E. coli, and enterococcus, indicating that the liquid is likely wastewater and could pose health risks. Due to the presence of wastewater on the beach, we have closed the area to protect public health in accordance with California Code of Regulations. Please respect the closure. The beach is closed from the end of Rosewood Road near Agate Beach around the point at the end of Brighton Avenue. Agate Beach is open. See the attached maps for clarification. I'll show that in a second. Although no illness has been reported, we are notifying the community of the potential health risks while additional testing takes place. Symptoms of sewage-related illness may appear days or weeks after exposure, making it hard to trace the illness to a specific event. Both humans and animals can suffer from issues like stomach infection, diarrhea, vomiting, skin infection due to untreated sewage. Drinking water. Marin County Environmental Health Services, EHS, is working closely with Bolinas Community Public Utility District. BCPUD has confirmed that their water is tested weekly and comes from a source outside the Mesa. Anyone who receives BCPUD drinking water may continue to use tap water as usual. However, if you are on the Mesa and rely on well water, we recommend that you do not use it for drinking, bathing, irrigation, food gardens at this time. Please use bottled water instead until more information is available. Alternatively, you may test your well water and treat it if necessary. Steps to treat water well can be found on Marin EHS's well and water system webpage. And then further updates. The exact cause of the wastewater seepage is still unknown. What happens underground is complicated and is difficult to pinpoint an area. Marin EHS is continuing to investigate its investigation and will provide updates as more information becomes available. So I just put some other resources here. So basically, if you have a well, here are some vetted sources for having your water quality tested and treating your well. So this is the same for the treatment. It's the same resource that they put here, but just in an actual clickable form. And then the other two are basically if you want, if you urgently want to test your water, which I would urge people, you should be doing that regularly if you're on a well anyway. But obviously with this new issue, you should test your water if you are able, and these are two sources for that.
Jenny?
If there's well water used to spray the fields, right? So here, Mesa Park.
Yeah,
So is that going to affect the watering of the field, do you use here, I mean, it's a park?
No, I mean, if you look at their alert, they're saying if you use your water as a potable source or you are irrigating like a edible garden, like, farming with it or whatever, that's where the concern, the irrigation of the field should be fine. I mean, I think that, also one of the things that I did is I looked back at that data, we obviously for our well project had to, share a lot of, well, first test and do exhaustive testing. The Department of the Division of Drinking Water was very concerned with the idea that we would be adding this source to our potable system
Yeah.
because it sits at the base of our sewer treatment plant. So it's, really, it's not really presented because of like my understanding based on like how groundwater moves, the watersheds, and how, complicated they are up on this effective table. What's happening at our well is not necessarily indicative of what's happening at a well up on a mesa that somebody's using. So I think, what I'm saying here as far as, hey, 2 years ago when we got approval and did exhaustive testing, the well water there was fine. There was no, which is why the Division of Drinking Water ultimately approved our application to have it included into our system. Yeah, with that said, that's not the same, testing that well is not the same as testing whatever well people are dependent on, especially, if they're using it as a potable source, those are the people that should definitely get.
Isn't the majority of the mesa though using our water distribution system? And how many wells are there up there?
Yes, I think that's a question because basically a lot of what they have on record are like, do people actually still use these? So some of the, essentially EHS also oversees those wells as well as the septic systems. And so the things that they've been asking us are, hey, do you know who's on wells? Like, and we have really, that's not our jurisdiction, so we have really limited data on that. But we can effectively, what we are doing is say they are like, hey, we see that this parcel has, a well on it. And we can tell them, well, we serve those people with a water meter.
Yeah.
So essentially, likely they're not drinking from, that's probably.
Well, and
best to
they're
judge
all
that.
having it tested anyways, if they are using their wells.
I mean, I think that
out of
particularly
water.
people don't is the problem. People have wells and then they don't.
I work with a number of clients who have wells and you have a system in place if you are using it.
Well, that's good, yeah,
Yeah, where you have somebody coming out and testing it.
yeah.
And often there has to be a filtration system to be able to use the water.
Question is this a new problem? Because we've been here for 4 years and go on walks north of Brighton. We've seen seepage coming out of that since we moved here. Why all of a sudden it's a problem? Because we've smelled sewage, we've smelled, we thought, oh, that's sulfur. Well, apparently it hasn't been just sulfur. And so it seems to me, why is this such a surprise?
I mean, my understanding is that this is not a new problem.
Yeah.
But basically the county was through the development, this is. I think that there's records at the county that this was a problem back in like the 80s, and there's a long history of, essentially what was a push to deal with a lot of the septic systems in Bolinas. And there was sort of political resistance to that movement.
Right.
And so I think that you'll see, and they're discovering, I mean, obviously the people that work at the county are not the same people that were working at the county in 1988. Right, and so they're discovering a lot of this sort of historical evidence of, oh, this was already happening, or, people were already talking about this back in the 1980s and that this was potentially an issue. So when, but what really precipitated this specific event was essentially, I think, some of the people that were doing work along the bluff. And that then got EHS involved in terms of, okay, what's it gonna look like for us to permit your new septic system? And then that got them, scrutinizing that system. And then obviously, there's people such as yourselves who are, when the county was starting to look into this, they were like, hey, this has been a long ongoing issue, and it's not just right here, it expands, across a swath, which brings us to this map. So I think it is, but I do think that, the county effectively was not aware, and it really is their jurisdictional responsibility at some level. And so I think that what we are dealing with today is probably sort of a historical aftermath of, Bolinas really pushing the county at arm's length. I mean, this is my kind of me like pontificating and just telling you what my personal opinion is here. And that we're dealing with the sort of vestige of that cultural kind of approach to these sorts of issues. It was like, this is where we live, go away, we can take care of it, we are responsible, we are dealing with it. And that's not to like throw all of those people under the bus or say that it's, it was those people that resisted those changes then. But I do think that this is really kind of what we're presently dealing with.
So now it's become an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, it's to your point, it's like, well, what is an emergency? Nobody's getting sick, right? It's not like what happened here was that a bunch of people ended up with, E. coli poisoning in the hospital and they traced it back to Bolinas, beach or whatever. What we're looking at is essentially a re-scrutinization of likely what was a pre-existing problem. And so, yes, it's an emergency in that it's not appropriate to be, dumping effluent off the side of the cliff.
Right.
But as far as, posing a significant health risk that's like acutely causing this crisis, like I don't think that's a fair characterization of it.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's obviously a super difficult matter, and it's like, I'm glad it's coming to the board and we're readdressing it, but yeah.
I saw that Grace had her hand up. Are you still there, Grace?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, once they've tested it, they have to close the beach. I mean, this is one of those if-then kind of situations that it became an emergency simply because they got information that forced the EHS to do X, Y, and Z. I don't think that they probably had any or at least very little ability to make any kind of a judgment call here. If their testing yields certain results, then they close the beach, right?
Yeah, I think that's right, Grace.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if I can ask, what's the sort of regulatory interface mechanism gonna be here? So does it look like the regional board and the county will be talking to BCPUD and things will evolve?
I mean, that's kind of what we were discovering at this meeting. Unfortunately, it wasn't like, okay, this is what we do in this situation and here are the mandates. Like we were, I think us and the county were kind of looking to the regional board around what is our authority here? Whose responsibility is, what are our lanes? How do we approach, anyway, and it was more nebulous than that. And there was definitely, okay, this is the point of a start of something. And there was some potential that effectively they go back to their, the executives at the regional board and say, hey, the two staff members that we were interfacing with had never dealt with this type of situation before. And so I suspect that it's not common, but it's not like nobody's ever, there are other communities that have dealt with similar situations. And so it's like, what can be gleaned from those scenarios? I don't think that these two individuals yet had that knowledge base to come to this meeting and say, okay, we've dealt with this before, this is how we're gonna handle this. And that was obviously kind of what we were hoping for us in the county in that meeting. But that's, it's too early for that, I think.
So one of these things that happened, I don't know, 15 years or so ago, some of you might remember what happened in Morro Bay. There was an issue with this was actually in the water in the bay, they were finding E. coli, so on and so forth, and they had to do an evaluation. And once they dug deeper in that case, I'm not saying that's the case here, but once they did the more rigorous characterization of the sources and the impacts, they found it to be a different type of a source than they had originally thought. So it seems to me the next step here is going to be, they're going to use a set of industry standard protocols for collecting, handling, and analyzing these waters. Probably look at a broader set of constituents other than just coliform, a whole bunch of things that we would look at. I think you guys know I've been doing this for about 40 years. And then we'll get some more information. So that process, I think, is gonna take a while. So it's gonna kind of feel like it's going slowly until maybe it goes quickly, right? You know, it's possible maybe that the regional board will issue a CAO, cleanup and abatement order. I don't know. Maybe our best sense of how that might go is if anybody has information on what happened when the order was issued for the lagoon that led to the treatment system that we currently have back in the 70s, I guess, that occurred. You know, I wonder if that CAO went to the BCPUD or, you know, how that occurred.
Well, probably it did because that was actually the sewer system that was dumping there, right?
Hepatitis.
Well, there was no sewer system, as I understand.
No, there was a sewer system. So our existing sewer system was the original sewer system that dumped into the bay.
Okay, I was remembering anecdotes from even earlier than that. Okay.
Yeah, no, so
that
ours,
makes sense then.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then obviously, yeah, this is different. This is, I mean, and it is consistent with that, right? We're not seeing stuff where our sewer system is really south. There's not an issue. Where the issue is down all of the
Yeah, I
sites.
think the map kind of shows you where the problem is at that part of the mesa. Looking over Agate Reef.
Yeah,
What's
I mean,
Agate
it's,
Reef, I mean, and
That's
Agate
from-
Beach.
yeah, and I'll just move forward a little
Just
bit,
north
you
of
guys.
Canyon, Brighton.
Oh, sorry, this is, yeah, Canyon here, sorry, I don't know if you guys can see this,
Yeah.
all the way to Rosewood
Exactly.
Road. I mean, I think that where is, you know, Alder Creek is like here, maybe, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, I think, you know, it's likely in the rainy season, if that was flowing and you'd done testing down there, probably would have seen stuff, like, again, I don't know.
No,
But I think that it's important to recognize that, you know, this red blob is kind of where they tested things and kind of, but that doesn't mean it's not that, oh, there's nothing going on beyond this point. Anyway.
Jenny,
Yeah, I certainly understand why the county, once they are cognizant of this, they have to do the research, they have to. What I don't understand is that there's not an acknowledgement that the tide comes in all the way up to the cliff, goes out, that water doesn't stay in that spot. So I'm not understanding why there's only a sign posted at Brighton, why there's not more signage that says, use the beach at your own risk if they don't want to include that into the shutdown. It seems like there needs to be more awareness for people to use the beach, because that water doesn't stay in that one area.
Yeah,
To your point, there's no notice at Wharf Road.
There's
Yeah,
nothing
I
at
mean-
Wharf, which is ridiculous, and there's nothing going into Agate Beach, which, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, because
And Agate Beach is open, and so that's, I mean,
yeah,
but just to point out, I mean, that kind of, I just skipped ahead because the county samples ocean waters on Bolinas Beach towards Wharf weekly. You can see those results here, and those are fine. And they did more sampling because of this event, kind of toward where the effluent is, and those were fine. So, you know, I think it's, you know, it's difficult right now because you're balancing this message of the water is fine and the beach is closed. So, you know, I mean, I think people need to support the county in kind of the difficult predicament that they're in and respect the beach closure. But also I think it's important to understand that there's, you know, the water is not showing signs of, you know, E. coli blooms or anything like
it
that.
does seem like there should be maybe a sign on Wharf that says you use the water here the beach at your own risk. So just something that acknowledges that this is going on, so people can use their own judgment if they're not closing it there.
Yeah. I think, I mean, people have brought that to their attention. I'm not really sure. I mean, we're not responsible for the beach closure, so
Yeah,
I can relay that message again. And I will, but
So is this the state water board people? Are they the lead agency or is it the county?
I think it's the county. I think the county was looking for the state water board to be that lead agency and, you know, they're essentially saying, well, you guys know what's going on there. You're better served
Okay.
than
All right.
to lead this.
All right, a little bit more and we'll keep going. Go ahead, Lyndon.
Yeah, the county had promised at that civic group meeting that they would be releasing the testing results soon. And
Okay.
as far as I know, they haven't released any testing results so far. And did they give any indication of what's going on with that, of why they're not releasing any of the testing results?
I do not know. I think that they're trying to get some like webpage up that will consolidate all of this information. I don't think it's like nefarious or they're trying to hide the results or anything. I mean, they've shared some of that with information with us and I've looked at the results. But you know, it's not really mine to then share with the public. So, but I'm assuming that they will, I mean, if they said they will share them, they'll share them. I think maybe they'll, you know, resample too. I think they did a lot of this pretty quickly and probably could have done it a little better to begin with. And so, you know, it might be something where they're just like, okay, let's do our due diligence. And make sure that the samples that we're sharing with folks, like we have a lot of, you know, faith in that those were properly collected and. All of
Well, that makes sense, because the initial results they gave back were so rushed and frankly, so hard to fathom.
Yes,
That I can understand why they'd want to make sure they've got results they're more confident in. But on the other hand, from our end, both the community as a whole, and obviously for BCPUD as well, if they don't start telling us more about what they're finding, then it just leaves us completely in the dark about what's actually the scope of what's going on here.
yeah,
So it's just, we will need that information, and it's better if they give it to us sooner rather than later. So to the extent that you're talking with them, I think that's just the message they need to hear, is that they need to release the test results.
okay. And you know, this is kind of geared up this, we're not sure what the frequency of those meetings will be, but you know, whether it's all three of us, meaning us, the county and the regional board, or just us and the county, we're gonna be conferring over these regular meetings. As we, you know, assess and then address this issue.
All right, a couple more.
Yeah, I just wanna kind of piggyback on what Lyndon said. I will just admit, I don't think this is a very satisfying update.
Yeah,
And I think that just relying on the county to like let us in on information when they have it is not enough for us. I know that you're poking all these other consultants and totally buried with work, but I think BCPUD should take a little bit more active role or position on this, even though it may be out of our jurisdiction. There is just a potential problem here, and I think if we can be proactive, even if it's just saying, hey, we have not yet received an update from the county this week, we're going to press them for more, stay tuned. I think that would be important, more than just waiting until we get something and then sharing it. But I also think that potentially we take on a more proactive role and hire someone, or look at who we could do other testing for us, who could provide some of this data, because I believe that Point Reyes Light article said that the tests taken were not valid because of the way they were handled. You said something about the EHS staff not knowing how to deal with something like this. They might not have any idea of how to observe these flows that were reported of, 43,000 gallons a day, or whatever it was.
I mean, I do think that this is generally their area of expertise, so I should hope that they should know how to collect samples and do all of that. I think that, obviously, we wanna help move it forward, but I think it's important to recognize that this is a huge, potentially a huge project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And when we set a precedent of say, oh, we're gonna do our own testing, what is the expectation, what is the funding model for supporting that? Like it, we need to be. It's fine if we decide ultimately to make those decisions, but I think we need to be careful.
yeah, of
About
course.
making those decisions, and the precedent that, that essentially sets.
Yeah.
And the effective, admission that this is our responsibility,
Yeah.
right? That is, we need to be really, I would
I think
say.
it's our responsibility to inform and keep informed the people in our community.
Yeah.
Not that it's our fault or that, like, I guess let's not spend our energy dealing with who's responsible for this. Let's spend our energy trying to solve the problem.
Yeah,
And so if that is more outreach, more signs on the beach, more posted next door, whatever, I think just that could be a role that I would like to see BCPUD have more. say.
yeah, I mean, that's basically the intention of this too, is like, obviously, if I had really good information to bring to this meeting, then I would be sharing that. I did ask, this brings me to this next. These next two slides, I basically asked one of our operators, hey, can you go walk the beach, go film everything, so I can share that at this meeting. So that's what these are. So these are, I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's a little bit of trickling. And again, what the source of this is, whether this is groundwater versus, direct wastewater, we don't know.
Well, we do know because some of them were tested, 17 sites were tested and 5 showed positive bacterial counts and ammonia. So we do know that, unless the article in the paper was completely erroneous. And besides that, I walked the beach and the signs were all down in the tide today. 2 of the signs were down in the tide. So the signs are posted on the bluff, but they've been washed. The water level has gotten up that high to wash them onto the beach today.
Okay.
So the public isn't being well informed at all.
Okay, and then this is the other one, this is the most. This is the biggest one, I don't know, I spoke to the person who today at the county, who said that they had gauged this visually as 10 gallons per minute, which is informing that, and I don't know what that visual inspection looks like, but to my mind, that's not what I was picturing, and so I thought it was helpful to just share some of this, because I think when people picture 10 gallons per minute, they were picturing something, at least I was. I mean, that's essentially
A garden hose on.
Yes.
full
Yeah.
Is around 5 gallons a minute, so 2 garden hoses on full, I don't have the scale there, but it's looking a little dubious to me.
So is that where the blue dot is, where we're seeing? this right
Yeah,
now?
I mean, again, this was actually unfortunately, as the operator did this. He was like, oh, I should have taken GPS coordinates as I did it, so this was his sort of best
Okay.
guess. So I take that with a grain of salt, but these are all, these were the places where it's seeping, everything over this area is dry, where you see the vestige of the salt kind of remnants. The places where you're actually seeing flow are all in this kind of area here.
Yeah, that's not 10 gallons a minute.
Well,
I've run a garden hose before, I know that.
let's
It's not
say
10 gallons.
it is 10 gallons a minute, like a septic tank is usually 1,500 gallons, so in 2.5 hours, a full septic tank would be empty. So this isn't like a septic tank that's broken, it's in our groundwater, whatever this is.
Yeah, but I guess there's all, I've like, okay, what's going on here? What could potentially be going on here? Like, I think it's really premature to any of us decide what is going on.
Yeah.
But there are potential things that are consistent with the evidence here that are still consistent with not a systemic issue. Where effectively, if you had, a little bit of groundwater seeping out here that ultimately mixes with some wastewater right near the end, you presumably could get pretty high spiking with a steady flow. And I don't know, again, this is just like sort of speculating about the potential possibilities. Or you could have what is sort of the other end of that, which is the nightmare scenario of, this is, yes, of course, there's stuff happening on the bluff, but what we're really talking about here is essentially a failure of the whole load that's on the
The mesa.
entire mesa
Yeah.
and that we're just seeing seepage of that out there. I don't, to my mind, that's what this investigation will be attempting, like, will be determining. But I don't think that we know that at this stage. And I think, one of the things I wanted to do was effectively, we took this video at a different time than the person at the county did. And so comparing our videos, and one of the things I was recommending as like, hey, we could do this and we, are, a very low cost contribution is having somebody walk this and kind of see how dynamic is this? Because I feel like that's potentially diagnostic, right? I'm presuming that if this is coming from, septic systems on the bluff, when somebody's actually, things are overflowing into their leach field or whatever, that's gonna be a much more dynamic, kind of flow than if you are looking at, groundwater seepage, and we're talking about that more kind of systemic, like, catastrophe.
Yeah, I just would encourage you to continue to partnership and help drive the county if they don't know yet what they're doing. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
this is state land, so I would disagree with your suggestion. Yeah, maybe we hire our own consultant to do our own testing. I don't think we should do that. I think if we're also taking videos, we shouldn't be posting that. We should be sharing that with the county for them to be able to post, because I just think
And
we want them to continue to hold the ownership on that. So while you're continuing to take feedback from our board and our audience about, yeah, we want to see the test results. We want to understand when they're going to be posted, how they're being interpreted. I also have been hearing from people that they've heard 3 years closure, and you were talking about a timeline. And what is this process? I think it's going to be really important to put pressure on them to post a timeline of what are these next steps. This is what we're going to be doing in the next month, quarterly, year. And I'm here in 3 years. I have no idea where 3 years came from.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean, just to let you know, especially at these preliminary stages, I vetted. I don't wanna just completely not, be encamped with the county on this, because I think it's important to have that distance to be able to apply pressure. But especially at these initial stages, I think it's really important for us to come at this with a partnership sort of approach.
yeah.
And so, when I prepared this, I shared it with a county rep and said, hey, are you comfortable with me presenting all of the material here? Because I think it is important, at least, it's gonna be daunting, and it is important if it, for them to have that sense of responsibility and not just be like, hey, this is.
Yeah, we don't want
deal
to,
with
we
it.
don't want to take over. ownership.
No.
I'd like to remind people that the county does test coastal waters. I think they have 27 sites they test every week. And they post all the results online. You can look it up.
That's what this is.
Yeah, that's what you showed. And there are lots of sites all over the county that have avoid designations. So ability speech is actually listed as fine, like we said in kind of in response to Jenny's comment, the beach water that they test is fine. It's all listed as okay the last 3 weeks. So whereas other spots in Ren are not. So we're not alone in this problem. It's shocking for us here, but it's a somewhat common problem elsewhere. That's all I can say.
All right.
And then, sorry, just to finish up, these
Yeah.
are, folks have been saying, it's not just these streams, you can see the vestige of other problematic areas. So this is just some photos showing that this is what the county essentially described as like 15 other sites. So there's effectively 15 regions along the cliff where you're seeing the sort of evidence of this issue. But with those 3 sites actively flowing at this point in time.
And you mentioned having smelled
Mhm.
this in the past.
Mhm.
That's the first I've ever.
I always thought it was sulfur because it was white,
It's white.
and I thought, oh, that's sulfur. But, and then I've heard maybe in the Point Reyes article that surfers have complained about, at the patch, have complained about the smell of sewage. They're used to it.
Grace, are you still out there with your hand up?
We've always smelled it on the.
I'm still out there and I don't have my hand up. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
That beats a lot and I haven't personally smelled it.
All right, I think I'm gonna wind up on this subject. And we will just keep everybody informed, as you are informing the board on our
Thank you
meetings.
for doing.
Yeah,
that.
thanks for
One more
yeah,
thing
you need to
for you
know.
take on.
Yeah, and it isn't a new problem, and so I think a lot of it is just, it's new to the people who are getting involved in it, so.
I found something that may be worth looking into. I was looking at the Todd plan
Yes,
about the drainage on the mesa.
Yeah.
It references something that I hadn't noticed before, the Marshall, Farnsworth and Associates septic tank practices in Bolinas, California in 1973. Figure 20. So I wonder if it's, I just noticed this afternoon, so I can look into it and see if we can find, information from the septic tank survey in Bolinas from 1973 that may be useful.
Yeah, I mean, some of that might be in the Questa study
I was
too.
gonna say, the
Probably
Quest to
so,
do
yeah.
that whole
Yeah.
study.
yeah. Well, I think there was a study that concluded that the septic systems were burdening the groundwater table to the point where the county did not want to issue any more septic systems
Mhm.
until they were satisfied that the groundwater could handle the flow that was already going in it.
One of the interesting things that came out of that meeting was that the UHS person had found that there was actually a building moratorium here from 1988 to 1990. And that was all off of the heels of basically, I think, kind of once Questa had been kind of pushed out of here, that was sort of the last recourse that the county had, was to essentially put this building.
Yeah,
Like they wouldn't issue any building permits.
no.
Yeah, I was curious, as you're saying, what triggered this? A few people applying for permits. I'm very curious where that puts people applying for
Yeah.
septic permits.
I've heard some
Or-
rumors within the county that they're not issuing any new septic permits. I don't know if that's true. or not.
So we might want to get that clear.
Should do. All right, I am gonna move on then.
Okay.
Potential for committee updates, volunteer committee updates, resource recovery, which is item 4. Want to address that?
Yeah, Belle was gonna present on that if she wants to still.
We, not much, not much new to say. The site's kind of coming back together. Joe's doing a good job of, and Greg, of kind of buttoning things up. We got the grind in finally, which made a big difference. Unfortunately, we had to spend a lot of money offloading a lot of that material. And we had a meeting with the fire department folks to just talk about resource recovery. And the big thing out of that meeting was essentially like this issue with material, because we have the grinder come in, it grinds the material, and then we have compost sitting there. And as anybody who's gone down there, there's just huge piles of compost that we can't seem to give away. And we're trying to figure out who might be able to take those large amounts of compost, because we had to spend a bunch of money getting it taken off the site. It was just using too much room. There's not a lot of room down there. So that's kind of where we're at, is trying to figure out what to do with the stuff at the site, and help support Joe with management of the site, day-to-day stuff. And then Jeff Creek and the fire department and us are going to meet next week and just start continuing conversations about that, and talk to Joe about some things at the site. Maybe we might need to close a little bit during the winter time. Joe doesn't really want to close a day, but maybe we'll close half days, or just start thinking about how to not get into the same situation we were in last winter. So that's kind of what's going on for now.
Right, thank you.
Think so?
Item 5, maybe resident permit parking plan committee. Somebody here to speak to that?
I thought Bruce was gonna present.
Yeah, I thought Bruce was going to be here, but maybe he didn't make it. Georgia, I don't know if you want to talk about the MOU, or I can.
Do you wanna talk about it, Belle, since you're on a roll?
I guess we had a walkthrough with the folks at the county to look at the situation for the overnight parking down there and just kind of see what the signage would look like and take a look at Wharf. And everything seemed to go really well. They're bringing the MOU that you guys saw and approved last meeting to the Board of Supervisors, I think on the next week sometime, the 26th. And so once we have that in place, then we can kind of start the permit program in earnest.
So do you have a calendar at all, an idea of when people would be invited to apply? What logistically, how's it gonna work?
We don't have a calendar yet. We've just kind of been trying to get through this hurdle of getting this MOU in place and getting our working agreement together with the county and then the sheriff's office who's going to enforce the permits. And but essentially it's going to be just these certain households who are downtown on Brighton, certain parts of Brighton, and a couple of maybe Wharf in the future, but we're just dealing with Brighton right now. And we're going to kind of take a look at what the other districts have done in the past to kind of manage the permits, but we'll just have people come in with a criteria that we decide in-house and have some sort of procedure for them to apply for the permit, and we'll be vetting them. And then we'll supply the permits, and I think they get them for 2 years and then they have to renew them. But I don't have the timeline. Probably, I'd say maybe early next year, or maybe depending on how we can get all this together.
So the next thing about creating the criteria for people to apply, is that something that the office is then gonna do? Are you gonna do that, or how does that get done?
There's some various kind of general rules, but yeah, they're giving us a lot of latitude on deciding who those residents are. Because one of the things that came up was, people who this is their second home, and so maybe on there, if it's associated with a car, that car is registered in a different city. And so we have latitude in our office to kind of look at our customer database and make decisions in-house in that way.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's not like we're deciding who is like maybe willy-nilly. The idea is the MOU specifies you need to, live downtown and that license, like your car, the car that's registered to you is effectively eligible to receive one of these permits. What we will be doing in-house is essentially, well, how do we prove residency? That's the thing that they're giving us a lot of discretion around. Because in other places where they have like, mail systems that work and stuff like that, you would produce like a bill or something like that. That's not really an option, whereas anybody who's tried to like get a real ID, and it's like painful. So essentially, we already have a customer database. We're talking about a handful of people really. And I don't think that we need to get too worked up about what that ultimately looks like, but we will have effectively a vetting process. And we'll make sure that we're adhering to all of the kind of prescriptions that are laid out in the MOU. People need to renew every 2 years. The sticker, I mean, they learned this the hard way, but essentially you don't just give like a parking plaque. It's like, it needs to have the license plate on it so that that's not a shareable thing. So there's things that we essentially don't have discretion over. And then things as far as vetting where we do.
Okay.
I wonder if you could have a plaque though with the license plate and that permit number hanging in the car.
You can, yeah, it's like, I mean, the thing that they pointed us to was essentially, hey, there's already a system at San Quentin and they use those little kind of static electric stickers where you put it on the,
On the inside.
inside,
Yeah.
and just a tiny little sticker.
Oh, there you go.
When people sign up, you can collect their phone number and email so that you can send them SMS alerts for water flow.
Exactly.
Do you think it'd be worthwhile to start that collection sooner rather than later? So it's not all of a sudden we're having to, register 70 households? Or would you rather just sort of wait until it passes all the hurdles I just don't know how much time will there be between, you know, going through the
I
board of
think that's-
supervisors and then putting the signs up and starting to enforce.
I think that they said that that will take a while because part of what they have to do is then coordinate with the sheriff's office around enforcement and stuff like that. And so, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Belle, but in the meeting that I was at before the walkthrough that you went through. The point person at the county who was dealing with this made it sound like there was several months.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we would, once that process starts happening, the idea is that we would start ramping up. So that we're not effectively a major delay on that process, you know? Anyway.
So the plan is to start with Brighton and then go to Wharf after.
Mhm.
I think that the MOU doesn't even address Wharf, right? It's like that's.
Wharf is complicated, as you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is really minor, but I read in the report, like, people slow down after the speed humps. That is, once they've come through town, that is not the case. They get to the College of Marin, they hit that speed hump, they see the water in that open area, they speed up, they come into that narrow corner, they have no idea. Then they hit another speed hump, and they're racing just to get to the end of a dead end, so that's really minor, but I don't want people to think that those speed humps. Or once they get through town, people are slowing down, that is not the case there.
Yes,
Is this also gonna address the unhoused people down there on Brighton? Can they apply?
No, you have, no.
You have to be a resident.
Okay,
Yeah, and I mean, it's somewhat complicated. I hate to like go over the details
No.
right now.
you don't have to, I'm not that familiar with it.
But it's, but it prevents overnight parking, so it's definitely not gonna be serving the unhoused is what I would describe it as.
all right,
Can I close that door? Or do you guys want it open? Would you mind closing it?
Tell them, thank you for this great summary to the parking committee.
Yeah,
Yes.
as always,
yeah,
and keep going.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right, I'm gonna move on to ad hoc committee updates. And I think I'll address number 10 after we do number 7. So Recology Detailed Rate Review Committee.
Yep, that's you guys, you wanna listen?
Sure, yeah, we met to discuss the Recology's one-time extraordinary rate increase request. We've met a couple times and we are, Belle and Georgia have presented us with a lot of useful data showing what different customers pay all over Marin County, specifically West Marin. So we have been analyzing that and coming up with a proposal for Recology, which should be out back to Recology hopefully by the end of this month. That's the update.
Yeah, and I just wanna really thank Kevin, he did a ton of work on this. Despite the fact that he said he collected that data, he really worked with that data, and it's really nice working with you on this issue. It was a big heavy lift, and I really appreciate your stepping up.
Yeah. Well, as it turns out, we probably don't pay as much as a lot of other people, so we had to acknowledge.
Yeah, I think the bad news is our rates will probably go up. Our Recology rates, because compared to neighboring towns and localities, we are underpaying. So
do you have like a factor of difference that you're willing to say?
that's TBD.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're trying to keep it low.
right, right. Yeah, it's not horrible, but you know,
We're doing
after
this.
looking at all the numbers, it became clear that we have to pay a little more.
Yeah.
All right, and even though this isn't in bold on our agenda, I would like revisit the Canyon Road Committee, number 10, because we have some folks here who talk about it. And I guess I wanted to say that I was surprised to hear you also said that yours had been dropped. Because as a member of the board, it hasn't been, and we fully intend on getting everybody on Canyon Road hooked up to the main. Off of septic and onto the sewer. And our first challenge was the water board because they wanted us to prove to them that the system that we had for our sewer collection could take additional customers, basically, because they thought maybe we were maxed out. And after the study we did, it showed that we weren't. maxed out, and so we were given permission to add.
Well, just to add a little bit of nuance to that, I don't think that they determined that we weren't maxed out. That is essentially our feasibility study, and it is kind of an acknowledgement that we are effectively maxed out, not in our baseline conditions, but in terms of heavy rain or anything like that.
Oh, when that.
Yeah, so we are, you know, essentially, I think they understood the kind of urgency of it and were like, okay. But, you know, this is in the context of you're not even fulfilling your immediate capacity, so just your immediate needs. And you're, you know, effectively you need to address your capacity issues.
Basically, we need to expand our system, but they're making an exception and allowing 6 or 7 new connections.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's sort of what comes down to.
that's how I would characterize it.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
And
Anyway,
like, and I mean, to be clear, like, you know, expanding capacity can also be improving the collection system, right? Because if you get a lot of infiltration into that system, then that adds load. So it's, you know, also our pond system isn't covered, right? Like, not to say that this is what you would do, but these are the types of things that, you know, when people think increased capacity, I think that conjures up a specific sort of solution. But ultimately, it can also be kind of protecting the system from infiltration of just rainwater or other groundwater sources that are seeping into the collection system or ultimately into the treatment pond.
so is there any,
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. Procedurally, this gentleman that was here, he was talking about, he'd been on the board for 9 years and water pipes needed to be replaced, and that it never happened while he was a board member, if I was understanding him correctly. I appreciate the fact that there are a lot of things the board deals with. And is it possible that it would take another 9-10 years to get this resolved?
no.
Well, I mean, you know, water issues, replacing pipes seems about equal to septic systems to me. And so I realize you're inundated with work, and is there a possibility that those of us who live on Canyon can be part of this committee, or is that not the way committees for this board work? I mean, because we might help be able to move something along.
Yeah, I think you know, and essentially I was like, let's form this committee because I wanted to prioritize this work and I wanted it to happen expeditiously.
Right.
Of course, nothing happens expeditiously because we have so much stuff on our plate.
Understood.
And so my intention was just to, you know, essentially be able to have meetings without conferring with a bunch of people and be able to, you know, have those meetings quickly, not with the intention of doing this like without obviously reaching out ultimately to the impacted individuals.
Right.
It was more that essentially the way that we were having those meetings before, it wasn't making a lot of sense in terms of moving forward.
Okay.
So anyways, it was, you know, again, I felt like my intention was to essentially try to move this project. It was
Right.
kind of.
And as an observer, to be fair, you have been giving reports on monthly BCPUD meetings.
Yes.
on
Right.
this.
Yeah.
You have,
So,
yes.
And the other part of my question is, I'm not sure how BCPUD works. If you, if we finally get an engineer's report and it costs $85,000 per household to do this, obviously some of us can do it and some of us can't. Is there a mechanism in place with your committees and with BCPUD that would hook us up with the right people in Marin that could provide funding for, I don't know, elderly?
Yeah, I mean,
You know.
to be totally clear, some of this is playing out within the context of the beach closure and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Because while, you know, Canyon Road was a pre-existing, it's really emblematic of a much
Yes.
broader issue. And effectively, what's happening with Canyon Road is that there's a proximity to our existing system, which allows for the feasibility of a, you know, solution that, of course, you know, so many people along the bluff wish that they had at their disposal, right?
Right.
However, and if it turns out that the whole situation related to the effluent is a broader systemic issue, it's not gonna be just individuals on, and this has never been the case, right? This has always been the case that when people need to upgrade their septic systems, there's a huge price tag that people can't afford.
Right.
So that is a problem that is, you know, essentially a problem that affects individuals in town.
Mhm.
It leads to environmental impacts, you know, and it's super problematic. Traditionally, or even recently, I would say, the BCLT has been the primary driver of how can we problem solve around this issue and help people that can't afford this. And that's where they, you know, I think kind of their ingenious septic pilot program came into play. When all of this was happening around the beach closures, I heard from, you know, Annie O'Connor, the executive director, who is, you know, essentially chirping in all, you know, county's ear, our ear, and I mean, they don't really have a line to the regional board, but essentially saying, hey, while you address this, you make sure that, you know, it's not gonna be a situation with have and have nots. And because, you know, ultimately what this comes down to is when we have solutions and they're gonna cost money. And especially when it's in the context of, oh, well, we have a precedent where essentially lateral lines are, you know, owned and covered by the you know, homeowner, or in the context of a septic system, the septic system is on you, homeowner. It's like, where is the infrastructure, or sort of the sort of social infrastructure in place to help those families that cannot afford it?
The public health response, it's a
Yeah.
public health response
Yes.
at this point.
Yes, and so, you know, essentially, it's like, with a declaration of emergency, does that open up funding for some sources? It's, you know, not clear. Essentially, what I've heard now, again, this is super early in this whole thing, but that there is funding at least for septic. I'm you know, presuming there might be similar funding for you know, connection to like lateral, you know, lines. But again, it's very early stages for, as far as I'm aware, for that whole side of the sort of funding that will potentially be available to homeowners.
Okay.
But it's obviously something that, you know, in as much as we have the capacity to either be like, here it is, or we get directed to, no, we want you to do this and, you know, apply for those grants and that, like, it's too early for all of, you know, to know exactly what direction this is all going, but I just want to assure you, it's definitely something that we're thinking about.
Thank you. And when you say it's too early, I understand your position. However, I've heard a lot of that tonight, that we don't have any numbers. We have a time frame. It's too early to hear this. We don't have the exact data yet. And so that leaves us thinking, okay, is it going to be 3 years until the beach closure is dealt with? Is it going to be 9 years? And that is putting a lot of us in a precarious position, including you.
Yeah. Well, is there a way, I mean, we do have this committee of Kevin and Andrew who are, you know, working on the project. Is there a way for them, these folks, to get some involvement in what you're doing, or is that too early, or, because I hear what they're saying, which is, what can we do to speed this along or do something, and I don't know if there is anything, but.
Well, I would say we have identified that it will involve a lot of neighbor coordination, right? We have, you all own your properties to the center of the road, Canyon Road, where we think we will need to dig a shared trench, which will involve easements with all these neighbors. So do you have a sense of whether all the neighbors are on board? Is everybody?
We have a sense, well, we had a sense that 3 or 4 are on board.
Okay.
2 of them are mandated to be on board.
Yeah.
We're on board.
Okay,
Billy's on board, and 2 other people have not committed yet.
okay.
And
But
we
that's
know
this,
that.
but that's this, no, I think everyone's committed, in my opinion.
Well, check.
2 houses are mandated
Yeah, yeah,
for them to get a permit
yeah.
for shoring up the bluff. And 4 of the other houses would like to see it happen.
Okay.
One is hesitant.
Okay,
Okay.
well, I think maybe we should check in and see where we're at since our last meeting. You know, we talked about different scenarios of how this is gonna all play out, just sort of exploring all the options. We haven't talked to our engineer for a while, I think.
Yeah, I've talked to him,
You have
but
talked to him,
yeah,
okay.
I mean, I
Because there-
have like 3 different projects with him, but
Okay.
that we did discuss, you know, essentially.
Because there was a similar project in San Rafael that we were hoping to
Yeah,
learn a
and
lot
that
from, so,
essentially, some of those got built out, so there's better cost estimates for what that looks like.
yeah.
So I think an answer to this would be that we should come to every meeting and hear what you have to say. And be more informed, and then perhaps if you need some help in volunteering, we could do that also later down the line.
Yeah,
And get more timeframes if we come to every meeting.
We're due for a meeting though,
yeah, we are,
so.
And we can help coordinate the residents. We know them all. and
If
appreciate
you
that.
need some help, we would
Yeah.
be willing to do that.
That's a good
Thank you
offer.
very much
Yeah,
for
it's really
explaining to us.
Oh,
and
yeah, no,
Addressing it.
yeah. And when we first found out about the folks on Canyon Road being red tagged by the county and either hook up or you guys are done,
Yeah.
we responded right away, and that's got us started to apply to the water board, so we're sensitive to your situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny, have
I'm glad to see the forward motion, because when I was on the board, BCPUD board in the 1990s, these questions were still coming up, we were discussing these questions, so I think it's way past time that things are resolved, and I think this problem that we're having at the beach is a good way to maybe put a little fire under having these things happen. And since the county has oversight of the septic tanks and the septic system, and this board has oversight over the sewer, I think it would be really good to encourage the county to say if they're thinking that there's issue with the septic tanks, they could at least give people information on caretaking their septic tanks. We never have gotten any of that, and that was a drum I was beating 30 years ago, that people need to know that they have to pump their tanks. You don't just keep using it and using it and using it. And I think there are people who do not know that, because I've talked to those people and they say, oh, you have to pump your tank. Well, gosh, yeah. So it would be really good to encourage the county to take a little action, since they have oversight and now they're working on this. And that would be really helpful before the winter rains, if people just got their tanks in preparation for the rains.
Grace maybe has her hand up.
Oh, Grace?
Yeah, Lloyd Kahn wrote a book about that, so that's probably available. One of the things that I was hoping may come out of the beach closure is a more feeling of urgency on behalf of the other agencies that have slowed this project down. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time and trying to move it forward, and there's been so many steps that we've had to go through with assessments of capacity and all that stuff that just in and of themselves are time consuming. And I think that's a pity. And I think it's been frustrating for a number of us on the board that it has taken so long for us to be able to respond to the situation with the folks on Canyon. And perhaps one good thing that will come out of this new spotlight that's, on the septic systems is the way will be made more smooth for getting approvals far above the level of us sitting around and thinking it's a good idea. So I'm feeling hopeful about that. And I have to go to work. It's lovely to see you all, but I'm going to be signing off here. Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah, just to dovetail off of what she said, at this meeting that we had this morning with the regional board and the county, since it's all the same players, I basically said, hey, we need to have a meeting about Canyon Road, because that's an urgent matter. Essentially the other thing that I did, but then this is, kind of customary, but basically I reached out to somebody at CDA to ask, okay, what are the permits that will be required for this project? and I didn't hear anything back. So definitely at that meeting, I will again push that. I do think there is, there's essentially a silver lining to this, which is essentially it should hopefully grease the wheels for, Canyon Road project getting.
I was really happy to see that the testing at the bottom of Canyon Road was negative on that
Yes.
report. And that's only because there's no water flowing down there now, I imagine, down the creek.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's also a dilution factor. It's like even the ocean is very big. And while these flows even during the winter relative to what other communities produce, it's just, I don't know when, at what point you end up with a, positive E. coli in the ocean. It's, you have to have pretty high loads.
Yeah.
So it's possible, but yeah, obviously if it's totally dry, then there's no conduit for that stuff to even be getting to the ocean.
All right, so this is an ongoing issue, obviously, and
Okay.
we'll see you next month.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, and just to let you know, I mean, we were supposed to add a little note, but I don't think we did, but basically. With the formatting that we're using is essentially bolding those meetings. So if you ever see, but I think, there's 6 residents, it's not a big deal for us to reach out to people and let them know, hey, we're gonna report out on the Canyon Road this next month. But that is basically our system now. So if you ever see, Canyon Road Committee bolded, that means we have a formal report coming out for that meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, I'll move on to action items then.
Yep.
Special reports or updates. Item 16, decide
Sorry,
whether.
actually, I think it's, or did you skip the, I guess did you skip the 11 through?
I skipped the non-vote.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, to report.
sorry.
That's okay.
What's that?
Item 16,
This?
decide whether to direct the removal of the quote days without post office unquote sign from district property at Olima Bolinas. This came up at the last meeting that, since it appears that the post office is now working it out with the property owner to reinstall the post office downtown, that effort to get a post office has reached a new level or something. And there was a question of whether that sign should be removed. We generally are not in favor of putting any signs on our property. But then the question came up about fundraising for the eucalyptus project. And we thought that on a limited basis, that was probably okay, because it affected that property right there. So we agendized it so that we could vote on whether that post office sign is gonna come down. And here we are. Should we go around the table or?
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my name's John Borg. I've been working on the post office issue. And I basically wanted to come here in person. First of all, thank you for letting us put the sign up there. And when we initially proposed that, we thought it might be 3 to 9 months or something like that, and it would be resolved. And obviously, the Postal Service has really treated police horribly. I mean, I won't get into all the details, but with regard to the new lease, or the new potential removing back into the building on Brighton, that is looking good, but nothing is done until it's done. We've come a real long way. In addition to the support of letting us put that sign there, which I think has been a really important communications sort of beacon for us. In fact, there was a Channel 5 News did a story tonight. They led with that sign, like it really helps visitors see it, what's going on in the post office. Anyway, so it's been very useful. The Brighton lease is not a done deal, but we're really on track. And honestly, it should have been done a long time ago, many months ago. But after the Mesa Park proposal essentially got tabled by the Postal Service for whatever reason, and after we had already suffered for a year roughly, we heard that the Brighton owner might be willing to consider it. And so essentially, we, not the Postal Service, citizens, a couple of citizens approached him and worked with him back and forth and whatever. So we've been doing that since December essentially. And there's been the owners signed a lease, not the postal service, but the owner signed a new lease in March. The postal service hasn't had a lease since March where the rent was frozen to, I mean, it's a very favorable lease and he dropped all these issues about the flooring and all this stuff. So anyway, he's been very reasonable and there's been a lot of back and forth. And so that is looking good. It's not a done deal. However, again, we're very grateful of all the support of this organization. And we're not, if another side, I know this is not a one issue town. We're grateful that it's been up there for a long time. We do feel it's important to keep the sign up for until it is a done deal. So the solution is, the plan is that I will remove the sign and relocate it to my farm fence. And I live on the way kind of out of town, the farm on the corner right across from the farm stand. So we'll remove it. So in order to do that, I need to kind of bolster my fence and build some stuff. I spoke with John Cozy of the Eucalyptus Project. His sign isn't ready yet and things like that. But essentially, the plan would be that probably, I think it's going to be the second week of October, something like that. We'll probably move it to my fence and it'll be there. And then the other sign could go up there. And so we're going to keep that up until the post office is done. And just keep in mind, once we get an agreement for a postal service, it's not done. There's still many things to kind of happen. And it's been such an insanely glacial process that, you know, we feel it's important to kind of keep that up there. So thank you so much for letting us do the sign. We'll gladly move it to my fence. It might take a couple weeks or whatever to figure it out. But that's it. I just want to come in person and thank you for
Well,
that.
good, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all your efforts.
Yeah. If you want to talk about glacial, talk to these folks on campus.
Yeah, I know, it seems like a theme. Yeah.
Okay, well then, I don't know if there's any action that we need to take because it's already been agreed to move the sign down.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just curious, not having heard about what is being proposed, put in place there, I don't know, just because I think when that sign first went up, I had recommended to Jennifer and the board at that time, we need like a signage, because this was when we were having, you know, we were in a drought, right? So I was saying, we need a sign that says something like fire hazard, you know, low, medium, or high. And that's where that sign got put. So
Yeah.
I would, you know, I would still want that to be like an information sign around our water usage when we need it, obviously.
And
now
now they
curious.
brought this up last time when you guys discussed this, I mean, you weren't there, but when the board discussed this,
Yeah,
that essentially that sign could be there, but essentially, if we needed to put the drought sign up, then it would take precedent, that sign would come down.
okay. And what's being proposed to put in its place?
Well, the Eucalyptus project came in to say that they still feel like a lot of people in town don't know about their project. And so they're trying to, you know, they've just submitted their application to the county, so now they're trying to really drum up support and do some fundraising. So they want to put a sign up at that location because that is the location of the work. And it's a BCPUD property and it's a BCPUD project alongside with them. Do you have maybe you could develop a rendering, but it's basically a sign to raise awareness about the Eucalyptus project. And, you know, I recommended, or one of us recommended that we put a sort of timeline on it. I don't remember if it was 3 months or 6 months. So, you know, and then let's reassess if we want to continue with the sign. So that's kind of where we landed with it.
Okay, I guess I'll look to see what
See
the
what it
sign
looks like. Yeah.
proposed. I do think there should be a time frame, and I
Yeah.
feel protective about what
Yeah.
we're advertising. I mean, I think the water usage was really informative. I like data. I think what John has been doing with the post office, what we're 560 some odd days now, has been shockingly informative. So thank you again for doing that. Now I'm hearing maybe we should let people know to pump their tanks. You know, I think there could be a lot of potential uses
Yeah.
for that. But I think we need to be mindful about what we're messaging, how we're using it, so that people actually read the signs.
Well, I think that's why we asked to remove the post office sign, because we didn't want to have too many signs there. We want it to be a focused message, so
Right.
that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is primarily to talk about water use, drought issues and things like that.
BCPUD issues,
Yes,
which, you know, the
Yeah.
project is a BCPUD issue, and
Yeah.
we've all voted in support of that issue, so I think it is an appropriate use of the area until something more important or pressing comes along.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've also enjoyed seeing this, not enjoyed seeing the sign, but I appreciated seeing the sign as a reminder every time going in and out of town, so.
Thank you.
All right.
You'll unfortunately still see it for a while, but
yeah.
we're getting there.
All right, there's nothing under 17. I'll go to item 18, resolution 572, implementing the California Governmental Conflict of Interest Act as amended.
Yeah, and so this is basically, you know, when you fill out the form 700, whatever that's called, I think it's actually form 700. So, people that are board members or in managerial positions at public agencies need to, you know, declare any, you know, self-interest or whatever, and so that's what this is about, and effectively, this doesn't really come before you unless there's a modification to your administrative structure, which happened with the position of the assistant general manager, which is why it's highlighted in red here, which is Belle's position. And so then she'll have to fill out a form 700, and this is just essentially alerting the public to all of those all of the people that are part of the BCPUD, including board members and the general manager and the assistant general manager, that we all have to declare our
So basically, it makes the assistant general manager is now included in under the political,
Yes.
yeah,
It's also something we have to provide to the county as well.
okay. So, is there any discussion on this? And if not, can I get a motion to approve resolution 572?
I
Go ahead.
Thanks.
I would move to approve resolution 572.
There's a second. You second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Moving on, operational resolutions and approval. Resolution 732, authorizing qualified BCPUD employees to perform construction work for the water wells for drought relief projects. You wanna
Yeah,
address
this is the one I brought up before. Basically, this will allow us to conduct this work. As I said, we will go out to bid, obviously, if we have to, for the individualized portions of the project. If they're over the bidding threshold. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Right.
The bidding threshold, anyway. Interestingly, it did bring up this other point when I was discussing this with council, that essentially we could declare through a resolution process that our bidding threshold, it could be like $50,000 instead of $10,000. I think that might be worth looking into.
Yes,
I decided not to pursue that because I spend a lot of money on lawyers, it feels like, and, but I do think that that is, worth looking into.
yes,
You mean our bidding threshold now is $10,000?
yes,
Yes, and there's, I can't remember what the name of it is, but public agencies can essentially, raise that through a public process,
Okay.
to 50. Is my understanding.
okay. Well, maybe you can, in your spare time,
Yeah,
and give us a suggestion on changing that.
Yep.
All right, meanwhile, can I get a motion on, resolution 732?
And are we doing this because there's funding involved? So I don't really understand why we're doing this.
no, it's because, okay, so normally on any project, if it gets over that 10,000, then we have to go out to publicly bid it. This project is very odd in that it's essentially two projects that need to be distinguished from one another, right? We could continue with the resource recovery well, and the 31 wharf, God forbid, would fall apart or something, right? And we need to separate it there. Secondly, there's portions of the project that we can, it's like move a tank over to Mesa Park. you know, those are things that we don't need to go out to have a contractor do. And there's small, piping essentially, and so the engineer was under the impression that we were gonna do this project mostly ourselves and then just, you know, contract with an electrician to electrify the project, et cetera. So this is essentially the formal, kind of process that allows us to do that without looking like we're trying to, you know, circumvent the, you know, the
Bidding process.
Yeah.
Got it.
So if there's any other discussion, we can get a motion on resolution 732.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So we're going,
Okay, sorry. Yes, I agree.
okay,
Aye.
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 Sorry.
Did I ask for a question?
Did you ask?
Call the question, all in favor, say aye.
Aye, sorry,
Four
Josh.
zero. All right,
It's getting a little messy.
Our time is a little off here.
yeah,
Yeah.
time to call it. Okay, let's see, it takes us down to approval of minutes.
Sitting in different seats.
Oh no, I'm sorry. There's none on the others, right? 20, we just did 19 and 20, and there's 19, there's nothing on 20 or 21.
22 and 23.
The 22 is the June 19th regular board meeting minutes. Item 22.
Well, I was here for that, so.
Okay. Does anybody have any corrections or changes to those minutes?
Not for me.
And if there are none, can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. The item 23, the July 17th regular board meeting minutes. Item 23, does anybody have any changes or corrections on those?
Not for me.
None? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the July 17th regular board meeting minutes? Please,
So move.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I don't believe we have the August ones yet.
So.
And we're really looking forward to Annie joining us so that she.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
And I'm impressed you've got the up through July.
I am too.
I'm very impressed.
Almost
I
there,
think they're great, the format. It's good.
yeah.
Oh, thanks. Okay,
Thank you, Belle.
All right,
working on it.
just item 25, which is the warrants that go from the 17th of August to the 13th of September.
Well, the PG&E true up obviously comes out.
Yeah, that's really sad.
I love the-
That's what I'm talking about, everything gets worse since I'm joined. It was like 15, I think, last year.
Yeah,
Really?
the rates are just.
And then Piazza, this, I think, I appreciate the memo, because it tells us why.
Yes.
For Piazza.
Yeah, there's a lot of Piazza expensive work.
Well,
It's unfortunately not all been paid for. We are, just to remind you, we're waiting to do all of that paving with College Marin, and that will, save some of the costs, so.
Smart.
Oh, I see, because they will cover some of that paving, you mean?
Yeah, well, it's just basically, we'll do all of our paving at once, so then, we don't have to, yeah.
Okay, any other discussion on the warrants or questions?
I was wondering about the Mesa Electric, was it says fixed power line to maintenance yard, was that in response to the sort of property inspections that we had, was that one of the problems?
No, unfortunately, it was the rock delivery, people took out the cord. Belle, am I talking about this correctly? That's that incident?
Yes, yeah, that was our delivery guy raised the truck bed or something or other and took out the line that runs from the BPUD building to the maintenance yard.
Ouch, okay, can they cover
Yeah.
that? Okay,
Yeah, no.
I mean, it's now bright yellow and we've informed them, so we are under the impression that if it happens again, we will ask them to pay for it.
Yes.
so this wasn't addressing one of the problems in the sort of.
Unfortunately, no.
No. We're just treading water here.
Okay, all right, no worries. And then the last one, the 20 yards of temp work, was that like some temporary admin help?
Yeah, that was the administrative, temporary administrative assistant that we hired.
Okay. That's all for me.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve the warrants?
I so move.
there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. Okay, come to the end, materials to be signed by board members, I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, I think we have.
We forgot, I think,
Okay,
unless
sorry,
you printed them out.
Sorry, Jack,
I
I have to
found it.
print them out because we have draft written on there, or
Sure.
intentions always to, in case it doesn't get amended, to have that copy for you, but.
I'll come by. Future agenda items? Nothing other than what we've discussed, I think, and our next meeting date,
That is, this next meeting date is,
16th of,
yeah, you're not gonna be here, right?
I'm coming back to 15th, I'm going to be in no shape to attend, but
Okay, yeah, it's the 16th, but I did wanna bring up here, I mean, we could put that on for next meeting, Kevin, but your request to modify the December.
Yes, we can talk about it now, we can talk about it next month, just to push the December meeting back a week. But,
That's to the 11th.
yeah, that would be to the 11th, yeah.
so you'll be
To
here.
not push up against the holidays.
So I could be here and, yeah, I will be gone on the 18th out of town, so I would like to push it up a week so that I can be here, but also just to give people a little
Holiday,
space
yeah.
around the holiday crush, if people will be traveling, so that was my idea,
For
but
the 11th, I'm
Yeah.
good for that.
it's not for me.
You for that, Andrew?
That's
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, we just need to make sure this is available. I can't remember if it was available on the second Wednesday. I don't think we ever looked at
Okay.
that, but let me just make
Maybe
sure
we
that
can,
that's true.
maybe we can put it on the agenda for next month and,
Yeah.
check in with the firehouse, see if it's available.
yeah, okay.
And you don't wanna move the 16th to the 23rd?
October,
No,
October,
Yeah.
why would we, is there a
For
reason?
Jack.
Oh, because of Jack,
uh,
you'll be
you
fine.
guys will, yeah, thanks, yeah, you know,
Well, Grace will be here.
I'll be wide awake. All right,
I think so.
all right, so with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.
So sorry, just how does that work? Do you guys bring, like, I can put that on for next meeting, you guys can just approve the modification of the meeting time? Does that go on the agenda? Or
It would be an action item on our agenda to change the meeting
I know we've done it